Welcome to High Performance Hockey Podcast. Today, we're joined by Associate Director of Sports Performance and Strength and Conditioning Coach for the Vegas Golden Knights, Doug Davidson. Doug has been with the organization since the team's inaugural season in 2017-2018. He has an honors degree in physical and health education and a master's degree in kinesiology with a dual specialization in sport conditioning and exercise and sports psychology. A really awesome conversation that I've had with Doug. I had a chance to get to know Doug over the past several years. Fantastic human being. We talk about his background, specifically his mentors, Eric Cressy and Gary Roberts, and the experience that he parlayed and the information that he learned through that experience. We also speak about his time in the American Hockey League, the slow cooking process, and how that affected his time and tenure in the National Hockey League. And then we also speak about the rarity of essentially starting at ground level as a new expansion team in the National Hockey League and slowly building the sports performance department. Outstanding conversation. Welcome to the podcast. Welcome to the podcast, Doug. Thanks so much for joining us.
My pleasure being here. I really appreciate you having me.
Yeah, buddy, it's a long time overdue. Really excited to have you on. Had the opportunity to meet you throughout the course of my brother Misha's tenure with the Vegas Golden Knights. Always accommodating, super smart practitioner. Really excited to spread a positive message on your background, your philosophy, and a little bit about your experiences in the National Hockey League. So let me start with this. Your current appointment with the Vegas Golden Knights. What are your responsibilities? Walk us through what that looks like.
Yeah, so I guess my official title is Associate Director of Sports Performance and Strength and Conditioning Coach. So by and large, kind of oversee the off-ice work that our players do. So obviously in-season training, a lot of maintenance work components with that. And then for team players that would like it, which is about half of our team right now, either via distance or at our facility in Vegas, oversee the off-season training. And then, outside of that, oversee the nutrition as well. We have a fabulous sports dietitian, Andrea Bear, who does great work. So I kind of work with her on a day-to-day basis, as well as when we're at home. Our chefs, kind of coordinating meals. It's a pretty standard practice for strength coaches in the league there. And then we're starting to kind of integrate some sports psychology, mental skills elements there. So involved with kind of driving that forward. And then probably the big part is kind of working with the sports medicine, sports science, and then also our coaching staff and kind of driving collaboration there. I think one of the things that we take pride in as our department, and it's one department, is the kind of the collaboration between the sports medicine and the sports performance. And whether that's kind of me supporting what they're doing from a therapeutic kind of resiliency standpoint, but then also, looking beyond just kind of the preventative therapy or the more rehab side of things, but also the more of a performance therapy mindset where, utilizing kind of their skill sets therapeutically to help drive some of the changes that we might be chasing from a performance standpoint. Working with our sports science lead, Aaron Heichman, either when he's running return to plays or also kind of looking at the various metrics we look at with our active roster players in terms of, trying to ask the right questions and find the best way to answer them. And then I'm probably the main touch point in terms of the coaches on a day-to-day basis, trying to give them feedback when necessary on practices. A lot of that has to do more with the healthy scratches and making sure they're getting what they need in terms of staying ready and to step in when they need to. But yeah, so a lot of different hats. Probably missed something there, but try more than anything, I'd say it's, a lot of just trying to drive collaboration between the different stakeholders in our organization.
Outstanding. And I definitely want to piggyback a little bit more about the high performance model for VGK, but I want to step back a little bit now. You had some interesting mentorships, looked at your bio. Walk us through, you had Cressy Sports Performance in 2012, Gary Roberts from 2013 to 2015. how did those experiences shape you? And then, and maybe, piggyback on that question, maybe one important lesson taken from the Cressy sports performance internship, and then maybe something taken from Gary Roberts.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, to be honest with you, I think it'd be unfair if I didn't start even before that, with my times at Queen University as a strength and conditioning intern. These are kind of from second year on to fourth year, I was part of the program that actually my year was the first year we had access to, and working under Rodney Wilson, who was our strength and conditioning coach there. And it's kind of very fortunate in the sense that because my year was the first year that there was kind of a formal pathway, as opposed to kind of some volunteer coaches. I was given a lot of responsibilities that I probably shouldn't have been at that point, and given a lot of opportunities early on to kind of cut my teeth and work with real athletes, run sessions by myself. And even by the end of it, I was overseeing the programming of multiple different teams, and kind of gave me an opportunity to really experiment with different things that I was learning about on my own, and really, I think, put me in a good position in terms of kind of my foundation as a coach, which then ultimately kind of really grew once I went to Cressy Performance. I mean, I think I kind of joke that, I learned more in 3 months there than I did 3 years previously. And then cool opportunity was then I was able to take that back to Queens for my fourth year, because I did it between my third and fourth year, and kind of take everything I learned there and then apply it when I actually had, the men's hockey team, the men's rugby team, which was an interesting experience in itself, transitioning from an athlete to a coach for that same team. And then as well as the football team that I kind of worked quite a bit with as well. So, I think with Cressy, the big thing is one, just that was really like, this is what high performance is. This is the culture, the mentality, kind of the integration of the therapy and kind of broader holistic mindset, I think was fantastic. And then I think to this day, kind of the applied functional anatomy that I learned there. And then, I've continued to learn through, the various stuff Eric's put out has just been phenomenal. I think there's a lot of good resources out there. There's a lot of good models out there. I think a lot of them are more on the softer, more rehab therapy side, and not that there's anything wrong with that. I think there's a lot of value and a place for those. But I think in terms of kind of applying functional anatomy within performance training, I've yet to see someone that does better than Eric, and was fortunate to kind of spend some time early in my career, and it's stuck with me since. So and that's really where I learned as well how to be a coach. Greg Robbins and Tony Gentlecore and some of the other folks that were Chris Howard that were working there at the time. The big thing that was really driven home when I interned there was, how do you coach? How do you get a 13-year-old kid that's never been in the gym and might be terrified? How do you explain to him what a squat is? Whereas before I was working with athletes that, most of them kind of have a basic framework for the key exercise, and it's just cueing, not coaching. Whereas that's where I feel like I really learned how to coach, which, think has helped me quite a bit over the years. And then with Gary, I think that was just he's kind of in a unique perspective with his background. Obviously, he worked under a bunch of phenomenal strength coaches, from Lauren Goldenberg, Matt Nickel. Obviously, he spent a lot of time with Paul Quinn when he was rehabbing his neck, and and then he's also been through it as a player and kind of has lived it. So I think, the big thing working for Gary is one, kind of better understanding hockey culture coming from a rugby background, but then also really understanding kind of the big picture of that. He always used to joke with me, it's not just about lifting. That's important. It's a big piece, but there's what you do on a day-to-day basis is, super, super important, from a nutrition, some a therapy, from a routine, and, being able to be consistent on a day-to-day basis, which, is something that, when I then shifted into the pro setting, was like, I really appreciated kind of what he meant there, and it kind of clicked. So I think just having a resource like him who's, actually lived it as a player at a high level for a long time, and can kind of give you insights that you wouldn't have unless you lived it, I think was super valuable for me.
Excellent. Let's walk through before you're a strength coach and performance coach for the Vegas Golden Knights. You spent 2 years, correct me if I'm wrong, in the American
Yep.
League, correct?
Yep.
At Wilkes-Barre, Scranton. I asked this question to Mike Donahue, and the same question I'm going to ask you. He spent time in the American League before getting the big club. How did that shape you? What are some lessons that you learned along the way? Was it a big aha moment, like a culture shock for you, or was it par for the course, ready to rock, feet hit the ground?
No, I think it was hugely important for me. And I mean, I was also very fortunate that due to the timing wise, I got to be a fly on the wall for back-to-back cup runs in Pittsburgh as a black ace. And, so I was fortunate as much as the experience I got at the American level, which I'll touch on in more detail here, I also got to kind of get more than normal experience, not just at the NHL level, but at kind of the pinnacle there with Andy O'Brien and Alex Drinko. And, so that was a pretty cool part of that experience. And I think really helped me when I transitioned over to VGK. But in terms of the AHL level, I think the big thing for me is learning about the bigger picture. And again, I had a brief understanding of it. I obviously had learned kind of it in a conceptual way from Gary, but to actually live it day in, day out, and being part of a team, and all of a sudden, whereas you're working on a private facility in the off season, the training is the number one thing. That's the most important thing. The gym is the most important thing, and obviously guys are doing skills on the ice, but during the off season, that's the focus, that's the priority. All of a sudden you're in season and you're playing games and there's practices and there's all of a sudden you realize that you're really not that important. I can't say that to be facetious, but
That's
the
right.
grand scheme of things, and got to have a bit of humility there in terms of there's things I might want to do, but what are the bigger repercussions within the hockey team, whether it's through creating unnecessary conflict, whether it's through competing demands physiologically. Also, you're not the one that is making all the decisions. There's gatekeepers, whether it's management, coaches that are going to have a lot more say than you are, and ultimately in charge. And I was very fortunate that at least the first, I guess, till December of my first year, I had Mike Sullivan as the head coach in Wilkes-Barre, and he really empowered me and was very curious and very much valued the performance side of things. So I think as especially as a young guy coming in where half the players were older than me, he kind of gave me the right, or empowered me to kind of implement some of the things that I wanted to implement, and then was able to kind of build rapport with the players as well. And I think that was the big thing, because of all the lessons, I'd say, when you're in the private sector, they're coming to you, they're paying you as the expert. Whereas, you have a wide variety of buy-ins, of dedication levels in the team setting. You have players from a wide variety of backgrounds that have done different trainings. Some guys don't like doing it, some guys love it, some guys love it, but might be doing things contrary to what you feel might be best, and just kind of figuring out how to manage that, how to, kind of drive positive behaviors, how to support players on an individual basis, and ultimately how to gain their trust, and show them that, one, what you're talking about, because I think hockey's a bit different than some other sports, where I think overall our athletes are pretty well educated, and ask questions, they're gonna and if you don't know the answers, they're going to find you out. And especially if you try to pretend you know the answers rather than saying, I don't know, and let me get back to you on that. So then you add that with the fact that, you have all the different politics at play within the team setting, particularly the American League level, where essentially they're all competing for each other. I think really showing that you care about them as individuals and growing them as players, and then kind of finding the right approach for each player on how to go about building the right habits and the right kind of work ethic and helping them develop, I think is huge. And so I think that lesson around buying the trust and walking the line between doing your responsibilities as a team staff member, but also, respecting that trust with the players. It's a lot of lessons in those 2 years.
Big time. Piggybacking on that, this stands out with me. I think you would agree on this. I mean, I think there's always, as a strength and conditioning coach or performance coach, you're in a perpetual juggling act, right? Like obviously the biggest ball off season is the strength and conditioning, we'd argue, right?
Yeah.
But essentially when the season starts, like you just said, I don't want to say we take a back seat. I'm not suggesting it's not important, but the biggest ball is the game schedule and the practices. And we have to step back, maybe at times pull the fire alarm without burning the house down, but understand the goal. The goal is the goal, and that's to win hockey games and be healthy doing it, not improving 5 pounds on a back squat, right?
Exactly.
And the other thing you said that hit on me, and it was a lesson I learned as a young coach, and it's probably the biggest lesson I learned about this communication, specifically with older athletes and older hockey players, is that, when you communicate in the private sector with young 12-year-old Tommy, it's more of a directive approach. Hey, Tommy, this is what we're going to do, and this is why we're doing it. If you have that same communication style at high levels like that, you will lose guys real quick. It's much more of a cooperative approach. It's much more of a, hey, what are your thoughts? Here's my thoughts. It's one to know to tote the line, one not. When to say, I'm going to lose this one because, hey, we're going to let him do what he needs to do if he feels confident doing it. Would you agree with that overarching theme or those themes?
Yeah, absolutely. I think part of it is, kind of I joked about us not being that important. There's also an element of humility where, if a player has played, 10 plus years of the league and he's playing at an elite level, who am I to say what he's doing is wrong? Now, there might be components that I think could be tweaked or improved on, but, I think a lot of people that have struggled, particularly coming from other sports, it's been hearing stories from players, and obviously there's two sides to every story, but in a lot of cases it's an element of, we're going to come in, we're going to change all these things, and not that there aren't things that need to be changes or could be progressed. I think there's a lot of areas that can be, but I'm a big believer that it's not change that people are scared of, it's rate of change. And if you kind of come in guns a-blazing, don't respect what an athlete or even a coach who's had a lot of success has done previously, don't take time to understand it and understand, okay, even if I don't agree with this 100%, what are the elements that actually are useful or valuable? What are the things I can steal? And then you can turn around and package kind of a new suggestion where it's not a total change, it's a small tweak. And I think that rings true for, working with veteran players. I think that rings true for kind of trying to communicate with coaches and various aspects that we do, and management as well.
I really like that. It's not change, it's the rate of change. I mean, you take time to educate that person over time through that cooperative approach, you're going to have better buy-in later on the line, right?
And it also gives you a chance to better understand the situation, especially if you're coming into a new environment. There might be things that at face value seem antiquated or, wrong, for lack of better terms. But, as you move forward, you might kind of gain a deeper appreciation, and even if you don't still completely agree with it, or you might think something else might be slightly better, it gives you better reference point, and then that allows you to have better, more nuanced conversations rather than you're wrong, I'm right, you need to change this.
Like that a lot. I'm going to steal it from you, bud. Okay, let's take you right into the first year of VGK, 2017 to 2018. Let me tell you, this is a really unique conversation because not many people start ground one on a brand new National Hockey League team. I know obviously Seattle, essentially you walk in to bare bones. You're building a sports performance department literally from the ground up. Nobody. So walk us through, if you can, like you don't have to walk us through the detail of day to day, but what were the big rocks in constructing the team? Is it still a team under construction? How did that work in the infancy stages, in sports performance for Vegas?
Yeah, I mean, I think, as you said, is pretty unique experience, and I'm, glad I got to take part of it. And there's definitely challenges that came with it. For example, on the logistics sides, ordering out all your supplies, all your equipment, all those things. I mean, you run a gym, you know how much that it is. In our case, as a pure example, we had a bunch of our NHL players that came in early because they wanted to get settled, and we're trying to run workouts kind of the week leading into rookie camp. And literally the day before rookie camp is when we actually had all our kind of squat racks and major equipment assembled, just because they kept sending wrong parts. And so, I'm off to the side on the turf trying to run workouts, 2 weeks out from training camp. And, logistical challenges like that, adding the fact that there wasn't a freight elevator in our facility and our gym's on the second floor, that made for
that for extra workout.
Yeah. But I think the big thing was, and I think we're very fortunate with our director Jay being very intentional in who he hired, and kind of the spirit and philosophy of the people he wanted to hire, in that it wasn't necessarily looking for the best individual practitioners, but who are going to be able to collaborate and make the best team. And I think that's really, really important. And then also was very intentional early on about taking the time for us to go through what do we want to be as a department, what are our big rocks, how do we want to best support. And that obviously evolved as we all kind of learn where we're at, and kind of got to know the players and got a better grasp on the environment. And in some ways it actually ended up being a bit of a godsend, being this new entity. One, obviously we could we had a year one budget, which is always nice, but then we could get some things, that some of which we probably haven't optimized yet, and some we haven't optimized till recently. But I think the big thing was there was no previous way of doing things. No matter what, you come to a new environment, and again, we spoke about kind of change versus rate of change. You come to a new environment, there's a certain way of doing things, and then you've got to almost slow deconstruct some of those before you can move forward, if that's what you feel is best. Whereas with the expansion setting with us, there was no one way of doing things. There was, 23 or 25, there's coaches and players were all coming from management. They're all coming from different environments where things have been differently. So there was no set way, and kind of give us a little more freedom to kind of dictate how we wanted to operate, and how we wanted to implement our program. And then the other side of it, as we went on, was we kind of got a little glimpse on what everyone else in the league was doing, because we had players from all these different organizations.
Sure.
You engage them in conversation and say, how is this compared to what you were doing before? Is there anything that you did before that you really enjoyed or thought was very valuable that we're not doing here? What are the things that we're doing here that you either really like and want us to continue, or think, maybe not as big a fan of? And, through that first year in particular, we're able to kind of, as the year went on, dial into the point where, I think we got a good foundation of the program moving forward. And, some of that was just the fact that I could kind of set what I wanted to do. And, no one really knew different because everyone was coming from different things, but then also kind of got to, get some good ideas from other people based off feedback from our players, particularly some of our veteran players. So
outstanding. So again, a cooperative approach.
This episode has been brought to you by the High Performance Hockey Masterclass. The High Performance Hockey Masterclass is a comprehensive lecture series exploring the science and practice of high performers in the sport of ice hockey. It was designed and created and engineered by myself, Anthony Donskoff. It is an 8-part lecture series that includes metric fixation, the tyranny of metrics, reading research, what matters, going back to get my PhD as a 40-year-old, how do you target your readings in terms of digesting, accumulating, and reading your research, biomechanical considerations for ice hockey, the adductor magnus, how we program hip health during the off-season and in-season, the Gain, Go, Grow model, this idea of a 3-day rollover program for high-performance hockey players, considerations for the in-season, how to manipulate that model for high performers, our communication structure within the confines of Donskoff strength and conditioning, and finally, the fast and frugal tree, considerations for return to play. More information on the High Performance Hockey Masterclass can be found at anthonydonskov.gumroad, GUMROAD.com. Thanks for listening.
So it was Jay, director of sports performance at the time, correct?
Yep.
Jay hires you as a strength and conditioning coach. Now you have additional hires. Obviously, now the franchise is now no longer brand new. Who are the additional hires that support you on a daily basis?
Yeah, well, again, just to, with our department, we're a bit unique, and I think there might be a couple other teams in the league, but our, sports medicine and performance are integrated. So year one, it would have been Jay, then myself on the strength and conditioning, Mike Muir and Kyle Moore as our or as our athletic trainers, and Raul Durantes as our manual therapist. So, and then very early on in year one, Jay realized that the demands on the strength and conditioning coach was not a one-man job, particularly with him being more of a global director and, definitely needing to spend more time on the medical side. So we ended up hiring Kendall Glor-Jorger as our intern, who I think ended up spending about 2 or 3 seasons with us, I think right up until COVID. And then at the end of the first year, we added the sports science reconditioning position, which initially was Jordan Troster, who's now the director of performance at Oregon. And then he left. When he left for that, Travis McMaster, who I know you've had on the podcast, came in. And then when he left for the All Blacks, then Aaron Heishman came in and has been taking the reins there ever since. And it's been a cool experience. They're all high-level practitioners, and all have kind of different viewpoints. So, it's been interesting kind of getting the different mindsets and views and seeing how that side of the department has evolved over the years. And then this year we've added Jeff Conkle, who had been our AHL strength coach since 2017, moved him up to the NHL level, and then he oversees all of our prospects pathway from a strength and conditioning standpoint, and then also supports us at the NHL level on a day-to-day basis. So that's kind of where we're at now.
Excellent. Pivot slightly.
Yeah.
Vegas Golden Knight performance culture. Is there is there a foundational philosophy that you guys have, a motto, a mission statement that you guys abide by? If so, could you share it with us?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's kind of corny, but our motto from year one, and I can't remember exactly how it came up, and honestly, it was kind of a joke to start, but it was uplift the players to uplift the cup, and kind of became a running joke. And then, but I think it really fit what we want to do. Again, we were very much from year one, how can we support the players? What do they need to be in the best position? How do we develop them as players on the performance side? Again, I think my mindset's not how do I get them fitter? It's what can I do to help them become better hockey players and, have better careers, whether it's with us or another organization. Almost kind of a bit of the mindset that I took from the private sector where, you're working for that individual player. And obviously, that's not fully the case. Team setting, but I think kind of the mindset of I'm trying to help each individual player improve and reach their goals is something we've really went to, and kind of view it through I looked at the 4 quadrants of performance, kind of how I view in just a mental model that essentially allows me to identify kind of what are the areas that this player actually needs to improve on, and am I a major part of that solution, or maybe I'm not, and that's okay.
That 4 quadrant, just to interject, is that the technical, tactical, psychological, and physical, or is that what we're talking? Or is
the way I use it is physical skills, physical capacities, cognitive skills, cognitive capacities, and kind of on the physical skills, that's your puck skills, your skating skills. Physical capacities, more traditional strength and conditioning. Cognitive skills, stress management, managing emotions, all those types of things. And then the cognitive, more on the kind of hockey IQ, decision-making side of things. Because again, ultimately, when we're trying to improve the individual players, a lot of this is discourse with coaches. And, as I'm sure you've experienced, a coach might say something like, oh, he's slow or he's out of shape. Well, what does that mean? What are you actually telling me? So trying to kind of have a bit of a framework in terms of the areas of questions that you can ask to better understand what is actually going on there. And then, hopefully on the, physical side of things, having some, objective measures that can give you a little insight in terms of, what limiting factors may or may not be. I think that's been really, really helpful for me. And ultimately comes down to a lot of kind of deductive reasoning in terms of, all right, this is what the coach is saying. This is my best interpretation of, the actual issue from a performance standpoint. What are the things that go into that? And then as you kind of go through, which of these seem to be the limiting factors, or, maybe it's something unrelated to, kind of physical capacities. It's in one of these other areas. And then, is there some way I can support them in that way?
Excellent. You'd mentioned the relationships and that you've had in the past, and now with Aaron, of course, with sports science. How does that relationship work on a daily basis? Is it return to play? Is it planning for the week in terms and measures of loading objectives? How does that Batman and Robin relationship work?
And I'd also add Jeff to that now, but it's just more than anything, just always having conversations, always getting different ideas. In terms of the pure sports science side, it's ultimately, what questions do we have and what's the best way to answer them? And, we have some things that we do on a regular basis that are kind of your check engine light, for lack of a better term, whether it's from a performance or resiliency standpoint. And then outside of that, when we do have kind of issues that come up, whether that's, a coach or an athlete coming to us with performance concerns, it's all right, how do we better understand? And we don't have an immediate answer, or our plan A based off of, what we've done before in those scenarios doesn't work. Then it's, can we find a way to better understand what's the limiting factor? And then in turn, find a better answer. And, ultimately that's what it comes down to. It's, on the sports science side of things, it's how do we get better information that can better inform our decision-making on a day-to-day basis, so we can better support our athletes, whether that's communicating with the coaches, whether that's communicating with management, the sports medicine staff, in some cases, nutrition, sports psych, or, the players themselves, and, kind of working with them individually, independent of everyone else, and trying to find a solution to make them feel that they're, playing to the top of their abilities or performing where they feel they should be.
Excellent. I know this is sexy. We're all talking about metrics, and technology. I realize it starts and ends with problems, right? But for your technology acquisition, how is that decision made in the VGK organization? Is it everyone communicating, hey, what's the problem we're trying to solve? Hey, this is a great technology to answer that. This is what this is our budget. This is the decision. Is that how it typically works?
Yeah, I think so. And then we kind of, at least year one, Jay and I talked a lot about kind of like what are the key checks that or boxes that we need to check with the technology in order to make it worthwhile. So there's obviously the question of like, what are we interested? What do we want to know? And then, so that's the big one. And then within that, the different metrics that a given technology can provide. Ultimately, it comes down to, there's three key things, four. One, can it give us kind of a athlete profile to better understand when guys come in day one or at the end of the season, globally, where they are in the various physical capacities. Two, can it be used for more acute monitoring in terms of, fatigue, neuromuscular fatigue, load tolerance, for lack of a better term. Three, can it be used for more long-term performance monitoring in terms of, it's not you played a really hard week and you're down, but it's more consistently being down from where you were previously or up, because that's also really good feedback as well in terms of maybe we're on the right path here. And lastly, can it be used in return to play situations as a benchmark. And then ideally, we want to be able to do all of them. And then if it can only do one of them, it better be a really, really important one. And there are a few things that we do that, realistically, they are return to play measures, and we're only going to use them for that. But if we get in a scenario where we're doing a return to play for an injury that's relevant to that, that is super, super important to have those baselines. So that's kind of the general framework. And then I guess the only other kind of question to have for that is, can this be a training tool as opposed to just a testing tool?
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a lot of different things out there that can measure things, but how can I utilize this in a way to drive better training, whether that's from live feedback or also just, a technology like, say, the different 1080 tools out there that allow you to load athletes in, interesting ways.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes plenty of sense. I think I was just talking about this offline with a friend. I think the more and more I'm involved in it, our environments are different. My budget looks like my hairline. I'm sure National Hockey League budget's a little different, but I think it starts and ends with problems either way. Whether you're able to afford the technology or not is a different thing. But I always say, can I use it as a baseline if the athlete gets injured? Can I make it part of my process for training so there's no testing day?
Exactly.
Right. And then based on the metrics that I'm choosing, am I able to measure that without affecting what's most important right now, which is touch points on the ice. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And for us, the reality is, particularly in season, the amount of time we have them in the gym, you don't want to waste too much just trying to get numbers. All right. So for us, the big thing is, outside of a couple pure return to play ones that we get as baselines at the start of the year, anything we do, we want to be something that can be part of the workout. And, they're not testing, they're just doing the workout. It just so happens they're doing it in a way that we're able to get some performance metrics off of it. So,
and are you dosing, just curious, more like a micro dosing effect in season? Is it more keeping the high days high, the low days low, meaning, workouts are done pretty much just after a game and then you're done? Or are you more of a fan of keeping it on an off day?
It depends on the individual, to be honest. I think globally, I'm probably more of a fan of doing the traditional kind of strength and conditioning work post game. I think there's a lot of value, particularly if you're kind of working in those hypertrophy ranges, in terms of helping guys down regulate. And the fact that, as you alluded to, keeping the high days high and the low days low. And then, I typically like to use the practice days more for kind of either, kind of resilience based training in terms of, staying on top of hip and shoulder and core health, more kind of athletic based work. One, because after games, guys aren't going to want to do kind of some of those more fluid dynamic movements. And also, our setup at the practice rink versus the game rink is much more well suited for
yeah, of course.
Yep. And the third one would be kind of if I'm doing more, targeted individual interventions with a player, they'll typically be on a practice day, just because it allows me to have time to, really be intentional with that. And whereas post game, it's a lot of get in, get out. And, particularly if the game didn't go well, guys don't really want to talk to you. They have a lot of coaching. They just want to put you to work and leave. And I completely understand that. So, that's generally how I do it. But then, we have some other guys that like to be a little more recovery based post game and then do, a lot more on practice days. It's really going to vary. And to be honest with you, a lot of guys more and more, and, been getting back to it with our new group, or something I did quite a bit with our initial group. And as our group has evolved, I've, myself and the rest of our staff have tried to push more of it. But honestly, a lot of our work, gets done as part of their warm up on game day, or as part of kind of morning skate. Just if you can add some targeted work in those warm ups, you just get so many more touch points, particularly with the younger players, that the battle is always, they need the stimulus to adapt to get them where they need to be physically, but because they're not where they need to be physically, they don't have the capacity to tolerate a lot of that work. So if you can kind of integrate that into a warm-up, that goes a long way. And a lot of guys find that they actually perform better because they're properly warmed up by doing some potentiation work. So yeah.
100%. 100%. Last question regarding, and then a final pivot here. But, we talked at the start of the conversation, that balance between that cooperative approach. If you're dealing with a seasoned National Hockey League vet that has his own way of doing things, do you meet that individual in the middle? Hey, Doug, you know what? I like the program, great, but you know what? I do this, and this in the off season, and I want to do that right now post game, and I'll add this on the menu list that you have. Is that a conversation or conversations that are typical?
Absolutely. I think in a lot of those cases, and it depends on performance too. Like, is this a player where, whether they're conditioning or they're skating or some aspect of their physical capacity is the limiting factor? Because then that becomes a different conversation. If it's a guy who's performing at an elite level, then I'm very open to, are you performing at an elite level and are you staying healthy? Those are the two things. And, if a guy's doing that, I'm pretty comfortable letting them do their own thing. I'll always check in. I'll make suggestions as needed, depending on how engaged they are. Very few players, where I don't have some sort of input. But again, it's at the end of the day, if a player's, particularly if they've done it over a long period of time, if they're performing at an elite level and they're staying healthy, who am I to say what they're doing is worse than what I would have suggested? So,
well put.
And then other cases, it's they have something they like to do, and I may not agree with it, and maybe they're performing at a high level, but they're having some kind of nagging issues. That's where I kind of might take a bit more of an approach of I appreciate this, but let's tweak those. And then in situations where the players aren't performing, that's where kind of not that it's directive to the level that it would be in a college or a high school setting. I force the issue a little more and just try to find a way to drive the behavior change that I feel is necessary. And fortunately, I think I have a pretty good relationship with our group, and I give guys that space and that autonomy. When I do come to them and say, look, we need to do this, they're a lot more open and receptive, because they know that I'm not just doing it for my own sake or to be in charge, so to speak. It's because I feel they really need it, and it's probably means the coach is coming to me with a concern about them.
Yeah.
So
outstanding. Okay, final pivot. Look at this from a broad level, not just VGK. Look at this from the National Hockey League and your colleagues. And maybe you say, Anth, there are none right now. But what do you feel are the current gaps in holistic care from a performance standpoint in professional hockey?
Yeah, in terms of care or kind of performance,
all encompassing.
Yeah. I mean, I think the big one, and I don't have an answer for it, but like the sleep and the schedule component. That's the reality of when your guys are getting ramped up to play 7:30 games. A lot of those guys, even at home, aren't getting to bed till 3 a.m. Kind of. We manage it as best we can. There's tools that have had moderate success, but unfortunately, in a lot of cases, it's like shooting a water pistol at a forest fire. And short of doing all day games, which just isn't realistic from a financial standpoint, that's a big challenge. But I think kind of a layer beneath that, which might be more accessible and ideal or would theoretically help, that is the kind of managing emotions, arousal, the mental skills component. I still think there's a lot of room to grow there. It's an area we've started to go down, and we have someone for team that is helping us out, but I still think and a lot of that is just a cultural acceptance that is a big barrier there. But I think there's a lot of room for growth there in terms of helping guys manage their arousal levels, manage the global stress and all the various stresses, whether that's performance anxiety, whether that's pressure from coaches, whether that's being able to come back around after making a mistake. I think there's still a huge area for growth, and I don't know the answer completely, but I do think that there's something in that area, and it's an area that I definitely feel we're trying to find some answers in. And then from a more performance standpoint, I still think there's a lot of room in terms of integrating on ice and off ice performance training and skill development. I'm pretty proud of some of the work that myself and Mish were able to do over the years with the rest of our department, and trying to integrate and connect the on ice with the off ice as best as possible. It's something that we're continuing to do with Sean Farrell, our skills coach now, and I'm excited with where we can go. But unfortunately, everything on ice has to go through the gatekeepers in the team setting, and logistics and other competing demands can get into the way of that. And some of that is getting everyone speaking the same language, and understanding what each other can provide to from a coaching, skills coaching, off ice performance standpoint, how they can help each other, how we can help each other. Ultimately, we all have the same goals, so kind of coming to a better understanding there, I think, can still grow, and then also kind of having the access and time to implement some of those strategies, I think, is particularly with the on ice component, can be a challenge. And that might not be the case in other organizations. Other organizations might be doing a very good job, but I still think, from my perspective and my experience, there's still a lot of growth in terms of helping players improve by integrating those different components.
Outstanding. Final two. One's more of a comment. Last one, I'm going to ask you about potential future plans regarding PhD. One's more of a comment. Stanley Cup champ. Unbelievable. Congratulations. How did it feel to hoist that bad boy overhead?
Well, thank you. And, there's not really words for it. Honestly, it's, I'm always careful, because, on the one hand, I'm very much believe, like, that's what the players did that, and obviously special to be a part of, and be there to support them. So I'm never one that likes to take credit for my athletes' accomplishments, but just obviously as much as rugby was my main sport, I grew up playing hockey, Canadian kid, and that's a pretty cool moment. So yeah,
unbelievable. That's awesome, buddy. And then the last question for you. I know we've talked off air about the possibility of PhD. Could you share with the group what you're thinking about, or what might be next for you? Maybe is a better question.
Yeah. So still trying to work through some details and process of putting together some applications, but essentially what I want to do is better understand kind of what are the actual physical determinants of skating performance. And we obviously at the point where we can measure a lot of general physical qualities off the ice. Over the years, I've, particularly at the NHL level, I've really found that, the physical qualities that one elite skater displays off the ice might be completely different than another. So then when you're trying to build out your kind of battery of testing, at least on the specific side, because I think it's important to have both general tests to understand the global profile of the athlete, but then on the specific side, it can be challenging, because what makes one athlete an amazing skater might not be the same thing. So my question is, when it's actually on the ice, kind of the force application strategies, the kind of time constraints of those application strategies, what are the things that actually matter on the ice, hopefully using some insoles to look at how physical determinants impact performance, and then doing that in various skating tests, because obviously acceleration versus speed off the rush versus kind of your tight turn cutbacks down low, those may be very different things, and then better understanding how do those vary between different skating styles as well. So we'll see if it's something I'm able to do. It's kind of a big daunting task right now, trying to piece together kind of my various ideas in a structured way to build out kind of a coherent plan. But we'll see.
Our guest today has been Doug Davidson. Doug, thanks so much for joining us.